John is a 50-year-old corporate attorney here in the Capital Region. He's busy, stressed, and juggling long work hours. For weeks, he noticed subtle symptoms: chest tightness when walking upstairs, jaw and left arm discomfort, fatigue, shortness of breath, indigestion after heavy meals. He brushed it off. Then one morning, while preparing for court, John suddenly developed crushing chest pain. He became sweaty, nauseated, short of breath, and collapsed at work. EMS rushed him to the hospital. His EKG showed a large anterior STEMI. In the cath lab, doctors found 100% blockage of his left anterior descending artery, the infamous Widowmaker. Dr. Mookherjee, when you hear John's story, what stands out to you immediately?
My heart sinks, of course, right? But I'm also so grateful and happy and relieved that he made it to the cath lab, that 911 was called, and that immediately he made it to the ER and they got that artery opened up.
Yes.
Because time is muscle. Time is muscle. So in that particular moment, there's no time to be like, why did this happen? There's none of that. There's none of that. Everything in cardiology, I tell my patients all the time, this is the biggest emergency in cardiology that we are trained to treat.
Welcome to 518 Thrives Healthcast, where medicine finally makes sense and maybe even gets a little fun. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath, internal medicine physician and founder of Thrive Direct Primary Care. And this is the show where we break down real health topics, ditch the medical jargon, and talk about what actually matters for your life, your family, and your future. In each episode, we bring you relatable stories, straight answers, and local experts from right here in the Capital Region. Because healthcare shouldn't feel confusing, intimidating, or out of reach. It should feel human again. Let's get to it. Today's episode of 518 Thrives Healthcast tackles one of the most feared medical emergencies, the Widowmaker heart attack, and what every adult should understand before it happens. In my conversation with cardiologist Dr. Disha Mookherjee Philip, we break down what actually happens inside the body long before someone lands in the ER. Heart attacks don't start overnight. They begin years, even decades earlier, with inflammation inside the arteries. Cholesterol builds up over time and forms plaque. Eventually, that plaque can rupture, creating what is essentially a wound inside the artery. The body responds by forming a clot, and when that clot completely blocks blood flow, that's when a heart attack happens. We also talk about the numbers everyone should know to understand their personal risk: your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your hemoglobin A1C, and newer markers like ApoB and lipoprotein A, which can give us a deeper look at cardiovascular risk. We pull back the curtain on what happens behind the scenes when someone arrives at the hospital with a STEMI or an ST elevation myocardial infarction, including the critical door-to-balloon window, where every minute matters to restore blood flow and save heart muscle. And importantly, we talk about what life looks like after a stent: medications, smoking cessation, cardiac rehab, and the lifestyle changes that truly determine long-term outcomes. The biggest takeaway: heart attacks are often preventable, but only if we pay attention early. Know your numbers, take symptoms seriously, and prioritize prevention before a crisis happens. Welcome to the 518 Thrive Healthcast, the show where we bring you made-up patient stories, local experts, and practical health education to help you live longer and healthier right here in New York's Capital Region. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath, internal medicine physician and founder of Thrive Direct Primary Care. Today, we're diving into one of the most feared medical emergencies, the Widowmaker heart attack. Joining me today is Dr. Disha Mookherjee Philip, a cardiologist right here in our community in the 518. Dr. Mookherjee, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here, and I am sorry to introduce two Dishas to our audience at the same time, but I'm actually, I'm going to restate that. I am not sorry at all. Disha is like the name. It's happening.
Well, it means that Disha means direction. Like we're headed in the right direction. So if you're lost, you really want to be following both of us because we're all both headed in the right direction.
Same direction. You and I share a lot of, common things other than our names. You're very much into prevention. You're a cardiologist, and you teach a lot about mindfulness as well, general cardiac, general health as well. So I'm so glad to have you here so we can talk about this for the Thrive community, for the 518 community. The reason I wanted to start this podcast was because I really feel like oftentimes us doctors get caught up in our day-to-day life and are so afraid of litigation that we don't actually speak out. We stay away from social media. We've been trained to stay away from social media. We've been trained not to say anything to, the media in general unless we get the 100 approvals from our hospitals or wherever we work, right? There's so much litigation risk with everything we do, but what has happened in this situation is that now social media is where people get their health information. YouTube is where people get their health information. And unfortunately, because doctors have been so scared to get out there and actually give the facts because, we've been told not to, that space is now dominated by non-healthcare folks, people that are not doing it day in and day out, people that are not really experts at this stuff. The doctors that are working on the front lines, we see this every day over and over and over again. And there's certain things that we wish we could tell people, over and over and over again. A lot of the things we say and teach are common, right? Things that we would like to tell everyone. I wish I had an hour to go through, sleep hygiene and nutrition and mindfulness, anxiety management with every single person. Sometimes we can't. Well, this is your platform, my dear, to do that. Let's actually introduce our audience to you, our local cardiologist who does this day in and day out, and you get to tell us what you wish you could tell all of your patients.
Oh, wow. What an opportunity. This is great. Well, and it really is because, in the day-to-day life of a cardiologist working in a regular hospital, you have 20 minutes to get everything done in and out. And we don't have that time to
Right.
sit and tell our patients really what they need to do. And I have a deep, deep belief, and I've just not even belief, I have seen for years and over and over and over again that the body has a tremendous ability to heal itself if you give it the right input and you take out the toxins. But what's happened is that what's the right input? Right? Everybody's getting their information, like you said, from this person on social media, that person on social media, that magazine, this, the cashier at the checkout at the local grocery store has an opinion. Your hairdresser has an opinion. Oh, you got to eat this, honey. Oh, you got to do that, honey. Right? And it's like you don't even know anymore what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating. Should I be exercising? Is this too much? Is this too little? Should I go be, I should be in the clear because I'm an Ironman athlete. Really? Right? And so there's just so much, what do they call it? Fake news, right?
Right.
And not everything that you hear and listen to is applicable to you. I say this every day in my office. Somebody will come in and be like, well, read this medicine is bad for me or that is bad for me. And, there's all this information out there about why that thing is not the good thing, or this is the right thing. And I always tell them, I said, hey, what you've been reading and what you're listening to, that whoever wrote that wasn't thinking about you. They don't know what your numbers are. They don't know what your family history is. They don't know what your blood pressure is. They don't know that you had bypass surgery at the age of 40 and then had 4 more stents placed. That stuff that you're reading is irrelevant to you.
And that's actually a great point to bring up right at the beginning of this podcast. We're going to be going over a made-up health case about a person who's going to have a certain diagnosis, and we're going to go through that. But remember that this is not health advice for you particularly. This is health education. So we are going to give you some of the facts that are just not available easily out on the internet in a condensed fashion. We're going to give you the real stuff that we think about. We're going to give you information about that diagnosis and generally how to prevent things. But it is still very, very important that you go see your own doctor and discuss your own numbers, your own history, and see how you can make this apply to you.
Yeah. And if your doctor doesn't have the time, then it might be time to find a doctor who does have the time. to really go through this stuff with you. And it's not that it's a bad thing. All of us doctors want to sit with our patients and really guide them. It's just that the system out there makes it really, really tough. And it's great to see Thrive be online now and really be available, because this is the personalized medicine that doctors who are moving into direct primary care they're doing it because they want to take ownership again, right? Of that kind of doctor-patient relationship where the doctor is really not only just prescribing medicines, but talking to you about how you can live the healthiest life so you can thrive, right? So you thrive and do and be all the things that you want to do. And so I'm just thrilled to be the first person on your podcast because I believe so much in what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. At Thrive, I just really wanted to like make a space where I could practice the medicine I want to practice, and I can give my patients what they want, which is time, which is, education. Like, let's go through things. Teach me about how I can make my life better. And unfortunately, just was not possible in insurance-based medicine. I tried it all, but let's get going. Well, let's start today with a patient story. Remember, this story is completely fictional. I had ChatGPT write it up. Okay, it's not based on any of our patients, and any kind of similarity is purely coincidental.
Yep.
But we're going to meet John. John is a 50-year-old corporate attorney here in the Capital Region. He's busy, stressed, and juggling long work hours. For weeks, he noticed subtle symptoms: chest tightness when walking upstairs, jaw and left arm discomfort, fatigue, shortness of breath, indigestion after heavy meals. He brushed it off. Then one morning, while preparing for court, John suddenly developed crushing chest pain. He became sweaty, nauseated, short of breath, and collapsed at work. EMS rushed him to the hospital. His EKG showed a large anterior STEMI. In the cath lab, doctors found 100% blockage of his left anterior descending artery, the infamous Widowmaker. Dr. Mookherjee, when you hear John's story, what stands out to you immediately?
My heart sinks, of course, right? But I'm also so grateful and happy and relieved that he made it to the cath lab, that 911 was called, and that immediately he made it to the ER and they got that artery opened up.
Yes.
Because time is muscle. Time is muscle. So in that particular moment, there's no time to be like, why did this happen? There's none of that. Everything in cardiology, I tell my patients all the time, this is the biggest emergency in cardiology that we are trained to treat. My interventional colleagues, so like when I talk about cardiology, I say I'm a general contractor of the heart, right? The heart's like a house, right? And it's got rooms, it's got plumbing, it's got electrical wiring, it's got swinging doors. And so for a cardiologist, I'm a general contractor and I farm out all my dirty work to my plumbers and my electricians and my carpenters. And so the interventionalists are my plumbers. That's what I like to say. I like to call them. And so time is muscle. And so when that plumbing is plugged up and has decreased all the blood flow to your heart muscle, the heart muscle can die. And then when the heart muscle dies, the electrical stuff goes, and that's one of the leading causes of death in men and women in this country. And it's called the Widowmaker because in that artery, it's actually the proximal portion of that artery, right? That the blood flow stops and boom, the heart can go into a dangerous rhythm where you need CPR or where you can pass away. So these are all the thoughts that first come to me. So it's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness that they called 911. It wasn't, honey, can you take me to the ER? It wasn't that. It was call 911. They get to the emergency room immediately. So those are the first thoughts that I have.
Yes. What exactly is happening inside the body, inside the heart, inside the vessel during a heart attack like this?
Great question. So what's happening is if you visualize a artery, right? Or inside, even if you just visualize an inside of a, right? And so there's like, I say there's crud in your pipes, right? So there's crud. So if and so one of the pieces of crud that's lining the pipe suddenly breaks off and goes downstream down the pipe. But your body sees that area where the plaque rupture happened or where the crud suddenly broke off as a big wound. Right? So just like when you cut yourself on your hand and a scab develops, your body is trying to heal that wound. The same thing happens in the artery, but inside the artery, that's a really small space. And so all your platelets and your factors, like all these stuff, inflammatory markers and stuff, come in to try to heal that wound where it broke off from, but it plugs up the artery. So while your body's trying to help you, it's actually hurting you in that way. That blockage is what blocks off the blood flow to the heart muscle.
Yeah. So that vessel wasn't initially clogged, but that little tear in the plaque then causes red blood cells to come on top. If you're a picker, I totally see this because, like, I pick my scabs.
Don't do it.
I know, it's so bad for me. See, and this is why, because like you pick at it, you get the blood coming in. It makes an even bigger scab, right? It makes an even bigger thing, and unfortunately, sometimes that causes 100% blockage all of a sudden, right?
All of a sudden, yes. So it's like I tell my smokers, right? Like, hey, it's like when you smoke and you have all this little bits of crud just hanging out in your arteries, right? It's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. You feel fine, but every time you light up, boom, it's like lighter fluid on a bonfire, right? That stuff can go immediately. You know, it's like a rupture. It's almost like a volcano that just goes downstream, and your body naturally has this mechanism. And so, you know, that heart attack didn't really come out of nowhere, because when we talk about heart disease and atherosclerotic disease, which is crud in your arteries, it's not just about crud in the arteries. It's actually an inflammatory disease process. Everything is kind of angry. And it started decades before that day that John got his crushing chest pain. So there was a study done on Vietnam young men who passed in the Vietnam War. And they did autopsy studies on them. They were 17, 18 years old. And when they looked at their arteries, they could see plaque starting to build up in their arteries. So it's not just plaque. It's not like baking grease in your pipes. What happens is that there's the lining of the artery inside it's almost like gets scratched. It gets inflamed, and it gets like rough, right? And then the plaque and the bad cholesterol and stuff gets stuck to that inside. So it's not that they're smooth, right? It's that it gets like every single time you smoke, every single time you're stressed out, every single time you eat inflammatory foods, right? When there's all this inflammatory metabolism going on in your body, is affecting every single vessel in your body, right?
Wow.
The arteries that go to your head, the arteries that go to your arms, your gut, your kidney, your legs, and of course the arteries that go to your heart. And they're all different sizes. And so if they get inflamed and angry, and then you have this sticky stuff coming through, it gets stuck. And then this milieu of inflammation that makes everything super angry and sticky and yucky. And that starts real.
So it was the stress of the battle, and most likely these kids were smoking because they were stressed in Vietnam, and that's what they think accelerated the atherosclerosis process in them.
I mean, you know, we'll never know. It's just the evidence. What's important about that study is that they could see that young of an age, because we always used to think that heart disease is an old man's disease. And now, this is what kills me, is that now we're seeing heart attacks in younger and younger people in their 30s and their 40s. And because we've had more obesity, more metabolic syndrome, more diabetes in younger and younger people, this inflammatory environment has increased so much with the advent of processed foods, fast foods. You know, we all know how much this has happened in the last several decades. So while heart attack deaths have gone down because of medicine, because of the cath lab, because of opening up arteries, that the death of it has gone down a little bit, but heart disease is still the leading cause of death in men and women in this country. And it's getting younger and younger because we're seeing more and more obesity and metabolic syndrome and diabetes and all these things. Does that make sense? And high cholesterol. We're catching it sooner. We're more aware of it. So we're finding it. So that also makes it something that we can do something about sooner in life.
Right.
But we're also seeing it younger and younger.
Interesting. So why does a blockage in this artery, the Widowmaker, tend to be so dangerous compared to others, the left anterior descending artery?
So you can see here on the right side, you see this right coronary artery, right? So that's the right side of the heart. But the left anterior descending, you can kind of see it there going down the front part of your heart, and all the way down, it branches down as well. So when that gets taken out, the entire front part of your heart loses blood flow. That's the septum. So in between the right and left ventricle is the wall there. All your electricity, there's like so much electrical wiring that goes through that septum and through those walls of the heart. That's why it's the Widowmaker, because the second you cut off all of that blood supply, all the supply to the electricity goes out, and boom, you go into these dangerous rhythms like VT, VF, all those kinds of things.
VTAC, VFib. Yep, those are the ones when you watch TV, they're the ones that get shocked, with the paddles. We don't have the paddles anymore. It's more like a sticker, but the shock is real.
Yeah. The shock is real.
So looking back on John's last week of symptoms, he was getting a little fatigued, a little heartburning, remember what he was just feeling a little bit, maybe something going down his arm. What red flags did he ignore? Like what should he have to?
All of it. It's heartburn that's like really hasn't been there before. Oh, it must be just heartburn. Suddenly, you've never had heartburn in your life, and suddenly you're getting heartburn and it's going down your arm, the radiation, right? The sweating, maybe feeling a little punky during the week prior, right? That's like maybe you're thinking you're coming down with a virus or something like that. You're just more tired. And I think one of the most important things that's happened over time, especially in our Western world, is we have learned to ignore what the body is telling us because we're so in our head about pushing through, getting the work done. We're so in the next thing. Our body is talking to us. Our body is telling us when things aren't right. It's telling us, slow down. But we override these signals all the time until the body's like, enough, it's time. If you're not going to give me this rest, here we go. Let's go.
You're going to see what I can do when I mess up.
Watch.
So how common are heart attacks today in our country?
Oh my gosh, I just looked it up, the statistic. There is somebody having a heart attack every 40 seconds.
40 seconds.
Every 40 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think the last stat I saw was 804,000 heart attacks are happening in this country every year.
Oh my gosh.
So that's every 40 seconds. There's somebody.
That's impressive.
What else do you need?
Yeah, seriously.
It's real.
All right. So we'll dive into how to prevent it in just 1 second. Quick pause before we continue. If you're listening to this and thinking, I wish I had the time with my doctor to talk about risk factors before things get serious, that's exactly why I created Thrive Direct Primary Care here in the Capital Region. At Thrive DPC, we focus on prevention, not rushed visits. Our members get same-week appointments, same-day appointments, longer visits, direct access to their physician, personalized prevention plans, transparent monthly pricing. And if you want proactive healthcare instead of crisis care, visit thriveconciergecare.com or follow us at 518 Thrive Health and become a Thrive member today. All right, back to the show. So, Dr. Disha, John had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoked, and lived under chronic stress. We talked about how that stress and all of these bad habits cause this chronic inflammation. The cholesterol builds up, we get plaques, and then those plaques rupture. We get a red clot on top of the, cholesterol-y plaque, the gunk, and then the blood vessel clots off. And once it clots off, it cuts off the blood flow. Heart muscles dies. When heart muscle dies, a lot of it dies, then we die too, right? So in order to prevent all of that, we go to the doctor, we get our stuff checked, get our labs checked. So for listeners in their 40s and 50s and even 30s, as you mentioned, what numbers should they look at? What numbers should they know cold as far as where they stand?
Yeah. So you got to know your blood pressure. Got to know where you run, right? You got to know where your blood pressure is. I heard this thing the other day. I was like, if you know your password to your cell phone and not your blood pressure, your priorities are messed up. And so you got to know your blood pressure. You got to know your cholesterol numbers, right? And it's not just enough to know your cholesterol. You need to know your total cholesterol, your lousy cholesterol, your LDL, that's what I call it, your lousy cholesterol, and your triglycerides. When your triglycerides are elevated, that's often an early sign that metabolic syndrome, prediabetes is starting to happen. That inflammation and that process is really starting. And we can see that in people's 20s.
Wow.
So many times. Yeah.
Yeah, we hear about LDL, HDL, VLDL, all these numbers that we could be checking in our cholesterol panel, triglycerides, like you said. What about some of the newer tests that are being done, like lipoprotein?
Yes. So for your APO, so one of the easier things that you can do too, like you don't even have to get super fancy, honestly. If you do a total cholesterol minus your HDL, you get a non-HDL number, which is often similar to your ApoB, which should be less than 130. Okay. So there's that. Another thing that's been everybody's talking about is lipoprotein A. That is a genetic marker. Either you hit or you don't, but it makes the lousy cholesterol more atherogenic. What does that mean? It makes it even more likely to cause you trouble than
more sticky.
That marker.
More cruddy.
More sticky. Yes. More cruddy, more sticky, more inflammatory, just worse. And it runs in families. And so that's something that's super important to know about as well. Your hemoglobin A1C, super important. But I will say, right now, technically, a hemoglobin A1C of 5.7 is a cutoff for prediabetes. But I feel like that's the last thing that changes, that really tips you over. Decades before you have a high elevated hemoglobin A1C, that 5.7, if you look at most people's lipid profiles, you will see that their triglycerides have been elevated and their HDL has been low for a long time. So that's like the earliest sign. And I know for me, like I do a lot of preventative advanced lipid panels on people where we dive deep into your lipid particle and the sizes of your particles and insulin resistance scores and things like that, where we can really, if you're really serious about your prevention and you want to know where you stand and you want to see how your lifestyle changes impact it, that panel is something that I love to do with people. I don't know if you do it, but I love to do that to really, really help cater and guide what kind of lifestyle they should be leading based on how their body is responding to paleo, to keto, to vegan, to Whole30, to, whatever.
What kind of things are you looking at in the particle panel?
I'm looking to see how many particles there are of the lousy cholesterol. I'm looking to see what is their predominant size. Is it big or is it small? I'm looking to see what their insulin resistance score is.
Okay.
Those are the main things that I'm really looking at. Yeah. Because I want you to know this, that a calculated LDL, which is LDL-C that you'll see on the lab form, right, could be 100. Okay. And somebody will say, oh, that's great. My LDL is great. It's 100, right? I don't have any, I've never had a heart attack. I'm 32 years old or 35 years old, but their triglycerides might be elevated or their healthy cholesterol is super low, 30, say, okay, 28, something like that. But then when I do their particle numbers, their LDL, their particle number could be 1800, could be 2000, could be 2800. And so that LDL particle number is way more correlated with cardiovascular disease risk than just a simple LDL-C calculated.
And
LDL.
what's normal for the particle LDL?
Less than 1,000.
Less than 1,000. Got it. Okay.
And so my metabolic syndrome patients, those patients of mine that have prediabetes, high triglycerides, low HDL, will often have very elevated LDL-P. And then when you look at how many of the small LDL-P that they have, very, very high. But it responds incredibly to lifestyle, low carb eating, their statin, all those things. It's very, you can change it. And I've seen it with my own eyes so many times that once I guide them to be like, okay, eat this, don't eat this, don't do this. Like it changes everything. The particles get bigger. The particle number size drops. Their insulin resistance score gets better. We have a lot of power if you know the right thing to do for your body at the stage of disease that you're in. So somebody who already has full-on type 2 diabetes and is insulin resistant and is on insulin is going to need And if they want to reverse their disease, they're going to need a much more rigorous conservative approach versus somebody who's in their 20s and 30s. And we're seeing the inklings of metabolic syndrome just starting. Small changes will give you a huge bang for your buck. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a continuum of disease that's happening also.
Well, we've talked about prevention. Let's go back to John with his STEMI in the ER. STEMI, by the way, stands for an ST segment elevation myocardial infarction. So what we're seeing on an EKG is the segment of the EKG just goes whoop, and it's like ding, ding, ding. This is bad, right? So that's why we call it a STEMI. What's going on behind the scenes?
This is like I said, this is the biggest emergency that we have in cardiology. And it literally, people are so shocked to see what a well-oiled machine this is. Because as soon as we see that, it's like a dance, a very well choreographed dance that happens. The EKG happens, the blood gets tested, the leads get placed on the patient, they get swept to the cath lab, the IV starts, and we give them medicine. I mean, literally every single person who's on the cath lab team, right, from the ER to the cath lab, the page goes out. I mean, it is literally, we have to get that artery open in less than 90 minutes.
And let's not forget our ER colleagues and our hospitalist colleagues that make that happen too.
They are part of this. It is a very precisely choreographed dance.
Right. And within 90 minutes.
Within 90 minutes, that artery gets opened.
So if you've ever waited in the ER and you're like, oh, I'm waiting forever, right? Well, you don't get weighted, or you don't get put on the backlist when you come in with this. You get put at the very head of the line. You're gone, because we have to get that artery open. And this is why.
In fact, when the ambulance arrives to your home or wherever you are, they do that EKG. They activate that cath lab from the field. So we know you're coming. That's how choreographed this is, because time is muscle. That's how fast it is. So that's why I don't mess around. Don't wait. We are waiting for you. Any signal, not one boom. This is how lives get saved. And this is why cardiology is so amazing, because why there's been so much advancement in it and why we can save lives now.
Right. Mm-hmm. So what if someone can't get to the cath lab quickly? What options exist for them?
So depending on where you are in our rural areas where there is no cath lab available, we also have, it's still super important to get to the ER, because there we have special medicines we call clot busters, right? Like where we can give them medicine to try to break up the clot, but then we ship them somewhere very, very quickly to a cath lab, to the nearest cath lab.
All right.
So there are medicines that we can give to.
Awesome. So thankfully, John survives. He gets to the cath lab within 90 minutes, gets his LAD opened up, gets a stent. What does recovery look like for him after this?
Well, he will feel remarkably better. I tell people, it's amazing how you feel when the heart gets blood, right? It's like in your garden. You have to, it's amazing. And he will feel remarkably better. And then his recovery will include probably staying overnight in the hospital a couple nights, so we can monitor your heart, and you'll be placed on certain medications that have been proven to help him live longer, help decrease the risk of rehospitalization, and decrease the risk of having another heart attack. So I tell people, I know there's a lot of people out there who don't like taking medicines, but in this situation, literally these medicines are life-saving. They're part of your recovery. And last but definitely not least, cardiac rehab is a part of the recovery, which is outpatient cardiac rehab. So after he has his medicines, he's going to have a big overhaul of what he's eating, what his metabolic markers are, what your lab work is, all of that stuff. Quit smoking. He's got to quit smoking, right? Because when you smoke after a heart attack, you're much more likely to have another one. Anybody with a heart attack is much more likely to have another one. But still, the majority of heart attacks that happen in this country are first-time heart attacks. And so cardiac rehab, 12 weeks of cardiac rehab, 2 to 3 times a week, where they go to a place, or sometimes we are able to do it remotely. There are programs out there where they give you an Apple Watch and you have a health coach and they guide you on exercises. But if you go to a brick and mortar place where they do cardiac rehab, which is highly recommended, they put monitors on you. They are watching your EKG. They give you a slow exercise prescription and you get a lot of education. There's a beautiful community there, other people who have gone through what you've gone through. Because another piece of this is that when somebody has a heart attack, it is literally life changing. And it's like you're faced with your mortality head on. And that can be really, really heavy for a lot of people. We know that the incidence of depression and anxiety goes way up after somebody's gone through something like this. So it's super, super important to have a really good support system. And the cardiac rehab place is a great community to be able to do that. And also we have heart disease support groups, also the Mended Hearts and the American Heart Association. There's lots of support out there to be with people who understand what you've been through. And of course, your cardiologist is on your team and your primary care physician, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the reason, life expectancy, one of the main reasons life expectancy has gone up during, for us as opposed to in the 1800s and the early 1900s, right? We are surviving these heart attacks and these medicines are helping us do that. Yes, he's going to probably walk out with 5 different scripts of medicines for after this hospitalization that he hasn't been on before. Hopefully those medicines help bridge the time until he's able to change his lifestyle and hope maybe get off some of them. Maybe some of them will be lifelong, but like the blood slickers that he might get, like aspirin, Belinta, those might be able to come down after a few months, after 6 or so months, a year or so. But yeah, so this is why cardiology is so exciting, because you're literally saving lives, like literally saving
lives. And these medicines, I like to tell people, they're like vitamins for your life. Meaning,
right.
People are okay taking their multivitamin every day, and people are okay with taking their vitamin B or, their chromia or whatever. And nobody even bats an eyelash. And, oh yeah, I'm taking my supplements, and they, because they want to be healthy. But these medicines after a heart attack are literally keeping you alive and healthy for you. And so, yes, depending on how much you change your lifestyle, depending on where you started, right? A lot of people, they come in with their first heart attack and they get diagnosed with diabetes and hypertension at the same time with their doctor before, right? But guess what? So often that diabetes is reversible, right? And then we can calm down that inflammation. So maybe you do need some of those medicines for diabetes in the beginning, but then if you really transform your life, you won't need that anymore. Your aspirin, you're probably going to be on for life. Your statin, you'll be on for life, because we know that the people who have these kinds of heart attacks live longer, have fewer heart attacks and fewer hospitalizations when they're on it compared to the people who aren't on it.
Love that. Now let's move on to new breakthroughs, new things that are coming into the field. What new technology or treatments are coming into the field that you're excited about?
Oh, I'm super excited about, well, first of all, we have now new alternatives to statins, even though statins have been proven to be life-saving and the least expensive options. But now we have PCSK9 inhibitors and bempedoic acid. And so we have all of those medicines, which are injections that are really, really showing to make a big difference in cardiovascular health. Also, everybody knows about the GLP-1 agonists now, which we tend to think of just as an obesity medicine or as a diabetes medicine, but really we have seen now that they're actually reducing mortality in people who have cardiovascular disease. So those are really, really powerful treatments, which is very exciting, especially for my patients who have really, really struggled with controlling their lifestyles up and down, yo-yo dieting. The diabetes just keeps coming back, and and the inflammation keeps happening. And so there's heart disease is a result of all of this inflammation and this poor lifestyle thing for many people, not for everybody, but for many people. So these are on the horizon. We have new ways, if we get away from plumbing, right? We have new ways to treat valvular heart disease with our TAVRs, where we have aortic valve replacements, where we don't have to cut your chest anymore. I mean, it's constantly, I love cardiology because it's one of those fields of medicine where like the advancement is so fast and there's so much that we can do. I tell my patients all the time, I'm like, I love it because I always have another tool in my back pocket as to like what I can do for you, depending on what kind of heart disease you have, because there's just constant progress and innovation. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And just to translate for our audience, the GLP-1s are the Ozempics and,
Jaro and the Zepbound and all of those. Yep.
Right. So where is preventative cardiology heading next?
Well, honestly, I always will go back too, educating everybody that it starts with your kids and how you're eating and what is the lifestyle. It really starts very, very young when we're talking about prevention, and really paying attention to knowing what your family history is, what things are you predisposed to, what is your environment, how are you navigating stress. Huge. It really, really is. And it's not just like, woo, go meditate. It's not just about that. When you're stressed and your cortisol levels go up and your inflammation goes up, it's causing all that damage to your blood vessels. Your blood pressure is going up. It causes all that damage to your blood vessels. And so really, I feel like preventative cardiology is really coming back to seeing the whole person, mind, body, spirit.
Right. Right, exactly. Disha, I wanted to ask you, both of us are moms. And so sometimes we do for our kids better than what we can do for ourselves. So will you just break down, like, what do you feed your kids for their heart health?
I never get the strawberries anymore. So I thought, so like berries are like a constant, staple in our house,
Kids will eat them. They're healthy.
And they will eat them, thank God. Yeah. And then I remember with my older one, when she was little, with like spinach, like I would take like baby spinach on a plate and just wilt it. And before she would pick it up with her little fingers and just like put it in her mouth. It was cute. Now, of course, they're tweens and teenagers, so it's a little bit harder to control their eating. But we sent our kids to Montessori when they were little, and one of the rules for Montessori was you have to eat a vegetable, a fruit, a protein, and a grain. And my 14-year-old still packs her own lunch every single day with those 4 things. Like, she can get free lunch at school, but she packs that for herself every day, drinking lots of water. Soda is just like as a fun thing. It's not a staple in the house. I grew up with it being a staple in my house. It's crazy, Right. So really, really try hard to talk about health and really fill our plates with our veggies first, and then our protein and the fruit, and then the grain being smaller. It's not always successful. My little one still will eat her mac and cheese, and she still loves that. But we really, really try to have it available, the fresh stuff. And having it cut up and ready to go is really, really helpful too. They'll eat what's in front of them. Me too. If I have 2 cucumbers sitting there. If I slice it up and keep it with me right in front of me, I'm going to eat it.
Right.
But if I might be more likely to eat that too. But now I know that all that processed food really lies to our nervous system, making it think that it's healthy, but it's not. And then it makes us want to have more and more and more and more. And this is how these addictions happen to that kind of food. So it's important to have the healthy stuff available and in front of you.
I love that. So powerfully said. That processed food is lying to your body. So let's do one last rapid fire round. Coffee. Heart healthy or harmful?
It depends. What? It's so hard. No, there's no blanket rapid fire around here. Okay. It depends on who you are. If you're someone who has AFib and you have lots of palpitations, and coffee is not healthy for you. Okay. So if we're having just 1 cup a day, or it depends who you are. It depends on it. Sorry.
Okay, it depends. That's a totally valid answer. Best exercise for heart health.
So the easiest one that everybody says is walking, of course. Right. But what I tell my patients is I want everybody to practice sitting on the floor and getting back up every single day, because this is the first thing that goes. So I remember, so I'll just share a quick anecdote. My mother has dementia, and one of the first things that made us realize what was going on is that she sat on the floor and she couldn't figure out how to get back up. When you sit on the floor and get back up, it's not only about your heart health, like you're expending energy, it is testing it's full body health, strength, flexibility, neurocognition, because you have to be able to coordinate your arms and legs properly to be able to create that stance. And so if you can sit on the floor and get back up, I don't care if you're 70, 80, 90 and you're able to do that, you're doing something right in your life.
Right, okay? Right. So many people lose that. Yeah.
So many people lose that. So I always say, sit on the floor, get back up 10 times a day.
Yeah. What's one food you wish patients would stop eating?
Processed.
Yeah. All of that. All the process.
In the middle of the grocery store with 1,000 ingredients. Or I'll say anything that if you leave in the back of your car, trunk of your car, it never goes bad.
Yeah. That's true. That's a sign. It's mostly plastic. All right. One daily habit everyone over 40 should adopt.
Drinking water.
Yeah, drinking water.
Drinking water is
I like that.
super key. And sleep. Well, God, there's so many habits, right? I would even say meditation.
Yeah.
Stress reduction.
Right. Okay. Well, if there's one takeaway from John's story, it's this. Don't ignore subtle warning signs. Know your numbers. Prevention starts long before the ER. Heart disease is still the #1 killer, but it's also one of the most preventable. Dr. Mookherjee, thank you so much for joining us today and helping educate our community.
Thank you so much for having me.
To our listeners, if this episode helped you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. It truly helps us reach more families across the 518. If you want proactive, relationship-based healthcare, check out Thrive Direct Primary Care and follow us at 518 Thrive Health. Until next time, stay informed, stay proactive, and keep thriving. And that's a wrap on today's episode of 518 Thrives Healthcast, where medicine is human, prevention matters, and your health actually makes sense. If this episode helped you, taught you something new, or made healthcare feel a little less overwhelming, share it with someone you care about. That's how we help more families across the 518 stay informed and stay healthy. I'm Dr. Disha Spath, reminding you that the best healthcare starts long before the ER, long before the diagnosis, and long before the crisis. Stay curious, stay proactive, and keep thriving.
This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The content of this podcast, including discussions with expert specialists, is designed to provide general knowledge about common health concerns and related topics. However, it does not constitute medical advice and should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical consultation, diagnosis, or treatment. Any cases or scenarios discussed in this podcast are fictional or generalized and do not reflect real patients or real-life medical cases. If you have specific health concerns, please consult your own physician or qualified healthcare for personalized medical advice. The opinion expressed by the host and guests do not necessarily reflect the views of any affiliated institutions. Any reliance you place on such information is strictly at your own risk. This podcast is a production of TFP Communications, LLC.